Frédéric Bastiat, the 19th century French political economist, saw it very clearly in 1850. Today's politicians and so-called patient advocates, not so much. In his famous essay, That Which Is Seen and That Which Is Not Seen, Bastiat explained that governments legislate to correct a problem and then bask in the glory of having taken action, but never truly consider what problems they create when they enact the legislation to correct the problem. In other words, politicians act based on what is seen, the initial problem, and the easily seen solution, but do not pause to consider the potential damage that their actions will later cause, that which is not seen. Over the past several years, so-called patient rights protesters, and if anyone were looking, insurance companies, advocated against the claimed evils of surprise medical billing, the situation in which, in its purest form, involves a patient's receipt of a full UCR bill from an out-of-network hospital-based physician in connection with surgery by an in-network surgeon at an in-network hospital. The solution, which varies slightly by state and is also the subject of federal legislation, is to impose a requirement on the out-of-network physicians to accept a purported fair fee arrived at by reference to average contracted rates. But, of course, the devil is in the details. As I pointed out years ago when legislation of this ilk first surfaced in California, there's nothing inherently fair in this notion of paying a purported fair fee. If there were, insurers would never have been in favor of it. As I pointed out at the time, there are multiple reasons why a group might be out of network, such as the fact that the carrier has narrowed their network and refuses to contract with them, or the rates that the carrier offers are so much lower than prior rates that they are completely unacceptable. Additionally, as I've seen myself in connection with contract renewal negotiations, carriers threaten groups to take significant cuts, or they will be thrown out of network and force them to then accept, quote, fair rates, which are even lower. Carrying through with that threat and generally narrowing networks seeds the data that will later be used to determine fair rates. In other words, if a carrier tosses every group with high rates out of its network, the geographic average rate becomes low with a spiraling tail effect. In fact, as I argued years ago and as I argue now, the entire point of surprise medical billing legislation from the insurer's point of view, likely unseen, but who knows, by the political class, was to force more and more physicians out of network, the very wrong that the legislation claims to cure. Of course, life is even more complicated than this, as two lawsuits filed earlier this year by U.S. Anesthesia Partners, USAP, against United Healthcare, UHC, demonstrate. Not only did UHC demand significant cuts from USAP in connection with contract renewal, UHC, through its various operating units, is itself in the anesthesia business. USAP claims that UHC is squeezing them from all angles, like a boa constrictor. It claims that UHC is engaging in a group boycott and that it's using unlawful tactics and pressure campaigns, even, quote, bribing surgeons to steer patients away. USAP, which is now out of network in Texas and in Colorado, is the plaintiff. As might be expected, UHC, in statements reported by the New York Times, maintains that the suits are, quote, just the latest example of the group's efforts to pressure us into agreeing to its rate demands and to distract from the real reason that it no longer participates in our network, and that private equity-backed groups expect to be paid double or even triple the median rate we pay other physicians providing the same services. Interestingly, both USAP and UHC appear to be leveling antitrust-type claims against one another. UHC's statements include allegations that USAP is using its market power to demand outside reimbursement, And USAP appears to be alleging that UHC's horizontal structure, an insurer, a facility owner, and a physician practice owner, allows it to exert improper power over rates paid. Last, but by far not least, both USAP and UHC might be courting potential danger. The Biden administration has signaled a much tougher stance in connection with both horizontal, same market consolidation, such as USAP's market growth in anesthesia, and vertical, different market consolidation, such as UHC's growth in health coverage facilities and physician services, antitrust enforcement. Their highly public spat is likely to draw enforcement attention. And either or both might entertain, quote, dropping the dime on the other, only to have the call ring back on themselves.